Hi, I'm Garm and this is Midgardia's cool crowdfunding show. I'm here today with Spencer Campbell again. How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about Dust?
Sure. So Dust is the first sort of official Slayers supplement. It's a zine that is up on Kickstarter right now, and it's a supplement. So it's supposed to kind of go alongside the Slayers experience, expand on your Slayers campaigns that you have, and it's a deep dive into the district called Dust, which is something that I alluded to like in a throwaway tweet months ago as like, ooh, maybe the gunslingers are from this place called Dust. And then that idea kind of just germinated in my head for a long time. And then I was like, why don't I actually write something? So it's this sort of zine filled with locations and monsters and adventures and lots of like fluff and lore for you to dive into. There's a map, a really cool hex map, great art, and then there's a new class. So it's supposed to kind of add on to your Slayer's experience with a sort of Weird West flavor to it.
Right, and it's a cool hex map. I adore hex maps. As anybody who has watched all like 60 some of these has known, it comes up a lot. Um, so
Yeah, the map I put together a really like just an okay map on my own. Before I had even started planning any layout or art, I was doing some stuff on my own, and I showed it to my friend Mike Riemann, who's ultimately doing the layout and the graphic design and all the art. And he's like, "This is good. I'm gonna make it better." And he made it way, way better. And so I'm so happy that he improved it the way that he did.
it's sick, and the art in Dust is really good. It's very stylistic, which I deeply
Hmm.
appreciate. Um, I do feel that tabletop RPGs have kind of a problem where like they go for this super realistic art style now, and it's not very flattering a lot of the time. But
Yeah, it's a new style for Mike. So I've known Mike for 5 years now. We're good friends. We bonded over board games, and his style is actually he's really good at cartoons. So he actually kind of has much more like animated looking style as kind of his default. But he wanted to try something new. And he's also obsessed with the game Spire, like I am. And I don't know if you've seen the art in Spire by Adrian's. The art is by Adrian Stone, and Mike wanted to try and do sort of a variation on that style. And so it's kind of cool to see the art coming along as a new expression for Mike as well.
yeah, and that's always cool to kind of like grow and evolve alongside another creator, feeding off of each other's influences. It's a good time, man. Uh,
Totally.
so what makes Dust special in the city?
So yeah, the thing about Dust, so the thing about the city in general in Slayers is it's a weird place. It's an infinitely expanding city filled with all of these districts that sit as sort of like microcosms next to each other. And so moving from one district to another, you might get a total tonal shift, like a very different feel from one place to another. But by and large, you can move around to these districts. The idea is that you could just walk down the street and go from one thing to the next. Dust is a little bit different because it is sort of, well, it's not fully explained, but it's sort of alongside or inside the city in a way that the other districts aren't, and that you can't just walk into it. And this is something that has confounded people in the city for a long time. But it's also the place where the gunslinger class in the Slayer's book, they have this revolver, and the revolver comes from Dust. And so even the gunslingers themselves, it's just a quick line in the book, in the Slayer's book, say they'll never tell you where they got it, where they got the gun from, and it's from this weird pocket district called Dust. And so, in fact, one of the adventures in the book is all about getting into Dust. So you start in the city and it's trying to figure out how the hell are we going to break into this place because we need to get in there.
Oh, I love that. Um, how I had a weird thought midway through that. How does public transit work in the city? Like, is there any?
Yeah, so in there's a little section in the Slayer's book that talks about this faction called the Wanderers, who are like the oldest faction in the city. They've figured out they're kind of in charge of public trans, and they they do it differently based off of the district. So they are sort of the innovators of new travel tech based off of whatever districts need. So the Witchwood, which is one of the districts in the book, it's very vertical. So the Wanderers had to come up with like elevator systems and things like that. And others are very water based. So they had to come up with like pull chain ferries or canals and stuff like that. So there's a faction that's been around forever, as far as people know, who are always at the bleeding edge of transport, but they have no idea how to get into dust, and it's incredibly frustrating to them.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I adore the idea of, little pocket dimensions and stuff like that. It's one of my favorite things in whatever kind of fiction that usually comes up in, kind of most of them. Everything except for
Yeah,
true crime, I guess.
yeah.
So yeah, Dust is what's it like being in Dust?
So it's obviously inspired by sort of American Wild West stories, or that sort of genre. So it is a kind of a sun scorched, sun baked wasteland, essentially. There's a large settlement that sort of sits in the center of it, which is going to be sort of the base of operations for the Slayers once they show up. And then there's some points of interest around the hex map, and then because it's a hex map and it sort of implies travel, and so the spaces between settlements or places of note are dangerous. It's not easy or safe to travel. Um, there's there's monsters there that the people the folks in the area think are cursed because they're like especially robust, and it's not only dangerous because of the monsters and things like that, but because there's a lot of gunslingers in Dust, because this is where they come from. And so they are sort of the de facto law, but they all interpret the law their own way. So your experience in Dust is like, for the normal person, terrified of monsters and terrified of pissing off the wrong gunslinger. For the Slayers, it's going to be going in there and wanting to kill those monsters and not be bullied by slingers. So it'll be a different experience for the players than probably the everyday folks in the district.
Right. So the general vibe of the place is kind of, Red Dead Redemption with giant monsters that occasionally smash everything up.
Yeah, and there's things are generally normal in the hub city, and then the further away you get, the weirder things get. So the small communes and things like that, or the locations on the outside perimeter of the hex map, are stranger, to say the least, than the sort of city in the middle.
Right, which gives you fun exploratory options as you try and get close to the theoretical border of this pocket dimension, and things just start breaking down and getting super weird.
Right, exactly. Because unlike the other districts in the city where you can find the border and move into the next district, what happens in a district that doesn't really follow those rules as you get to the borders? What are their borders and things like that?
Like the far lands in the really old builds of Minecraft, where the world generation starts breaking down and everything just looks super weird.
Exactly.
Sweet. I like the sound of that. Um, so why don't you tell me a little bit about the Deadeye?
Yeah, so the Deadeye is the new class that's in the book. And so I was trying to the Deadeye actually came up probably before Dust as like a concept, as a zine came up. The Deadeye was something I had on the page as part of a separate game that I was working on. So I have a whole other game that I'm working on that is about the gunslinger class and sort of expanding on it. And I wanted to create multiple types of slingers. And so I've got the one that I have in Slayers, and I was thinking of others. And so the Deadeye as this sort of rifle. They use a like kind of a long range rifle as their primary weapon, and they'll feel somewhat familiar to the gunslinger, which, like, the main mechanic of the gunslinger class is all about managing your ammo and things like that, and deciding when to shoot. So there's a similar sort of reloading ammo system going on with the Deadeye, but it's not the same as the gunslinger. The Deadeye is much more focused on landing these big single hits that are just going to be devastating, like critical headshot sort of things. Um, And so their whole mechanic is surrounding like lining up shots, getting advantageous shots to like do a ridiculous amount of damage in a single blow. Their other cool thing is that they analyze. They have a strange sort of like mechanical occult eye that has replaced one of their eyes, and they can use it to analyze monsters or whoever they're hunting, really. And they can use it to gain interesting information from the GM, or they can use it to set up allies or attacks, or even to sort of speed themselves up in sort of anticipation of how those monsters are going to act. So they're all about kind of taking their time, lining up their shot, and making it count.
I adore your general sense of like aesthetics and world building. It's fantastic.
Thank you very much.
I love both cybernetics and horrible mergers of technology and magic. I love it's beautiful.
Yeah, the whole premise of the gunslinger being special in Slayers is that they have these six-shooter revolvers, which nobody else in the city has. So this sort of implies a tech level in the city as being just prior to that. So, anybody who has a firearm is going to be using something like a flintlock pistol or a flintlock rifle or something like that. So the person who's got a new fancy gun in Dust can't just have like a single shot rifle. It's got to be something weird with like cogs and like some sort of occultism, because you learn in Dust that the people who make these things, they're kind of weird. They worship the firearm like a god. So of course they're going to make people who wield these things not just like soldiers, but almost as like missionaries of their cause.
Right. You ever seen any of the old revolver rifles? The rifles with like a full revolver cartridge for the bullets? Because
No, I haven't.
that was a real thing that was built. They were
I
not.
have to go look that up.
Oh man, they weren't adopted widely just because of the way cartridges were built then. It resulted in gunpowder building up inside the cartridge and they occasionally exploded. But obviously that's a problem that we've solved nowadays, but we have better solutions to that problem. Um,
Interesting.
I just love bringing up the revolver rifle whenever I can because it was cool.
That sounds very cool. I just want to look at pictures of it just to see kind of what it looks like.
Yeah,
Sounds
like,
cool.
like that or the harmonica style cartridges for
Yeah.
yeah. Good times. I like guns. Not in a I'm about to start a gun cult kind of way, but firearms history is really cool.
Nice. Yeah, I like playing around with the idea of, so that that slingers game that I talked about mentioned earlier is kind of leaning into that idea of different ways that we can interact with the concept of a firearm mechanically, rather than just I roll to shoot and I hit or I don't hit. How can we roll dice in a way that represents the actual weapon itself? Which
Right.
is kind of the whole premise of Slayers in the first place. So
I'm looking forward to that spinoff, by the way.
yeah, well, we'll see when that comes around.
Yeah. Such as the creative life. Uh,
Mm.
so on the topic of Slayers and moving slightly away from Dust itself, it's been what, 3 months? The book is already out. You can see it behind me on the shelf. It physically exists, which
It
is
does.
impressive for a Kickstarter. That kind of turnaround, and you've had quite the little community that's built up and made a lot of content on their own. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm blown away by that, and it's very very cool for me to see. So we have a Discord community, and not only are there just a bunch of fantastic people in there who are, they're asking questions, helping one another out about stuff related to Slayers, but then once the PDF version of Slayers went live on itch, I started the Slayers Jam, and I released this thing called the Creator Kit that had all these templates and rules for people to use, and it invited people to just make stuff for Slayers. Because it's released with a Creative Commons license that makes it just like do whatever you want with it. Just go have fun with it, make your own things, and people really took that to heart. And so the Slayers Jam has been going on. It actually ends this Saturday on Halloween, at the end of Halloween. And it's there have been over 20 submissions. I think we're close to 25 submissions. And that's just like a submission. One person's submission could have a bunch of things inside of it. So there's got to be at least 15 to 20 new classes that people have come up with. There's some districts that people have. In fact, one just came out that was a package of 6 new districts with, NPCs and locations and rumors. I know some folks who are working on things that are full-blown hacks of it. So taking it into a sci-fi setting, for example, taking the core assumptions of what Slayers is all about is these asymmetrical classes, but why make it goth? It doesn't have to be a gothic monster hunting game. It could be anything. And so there's some really amazingly talented people out there making stuff for Slayers, and the Slayers Jam has been a super cool thing just to see people just throw out the most creative stuff, some of the most creative stuff that I've ever seen. When I did an early play test of this a few months ago, Adira Slattery, a friend of mine who I met in another Discord, she came up with 6 classes the night after the play test. I think she came up with 6 on her own, and I think that's one thing a lot of people have said is that the class building, the ability to just make a class by coming up with an attack action, a quick action, and then maybe something else, like maybe a passive or something like that. That's really all you need to make a class. And, some fun way of interacting with dice, but some people have come up with ways of doing it with cards or shapes and things like that. And people really like coming up with classes, I found, which is really, I think I totally agree. I think that's the most fun thing to make for Slayer stuff is class-based stuff. So I'm amazed by it. I'm amazed and humbled that so many people want to make things for my game.
It's a cool game. There's a lot of cool ideas, and I really adore the asymmetrical class stuff. It's nice.
Thank you very much.
I mean, I love a lot of games. It is very rare to see. It's very rare to see those kind of like every class plays completely different kind of things.
Yeah, I think that comes from my. I think I mentioned this last time we talked. That comes from my board game background and how there are some board games out there that just really lean into that idea of asymmetry. Root is kind of my go-to example for that. And I just think that we can absolutely have that in role-playing games to like that extreme of a degree of asymmetry. So I'm excited to see people embracing that idea. I'm excited to hopefully see other people throwing that more so into their games. In fact, Adam Vass, who produces under the name World Champ Game Company or World Champ Game Co., he came out with a game. Was it earlier this month or maybe last month? Hell Cabin, which is this beautiful print on a newspaper, and it has very much like asymmetrical class play in it. And so I'm really excited to see other people doing stuff with that idea.
Yeah, it's nice. It's rare to see like huge mechanical innovation in the tabletop RPG space. I think the last major one I can think of is like Powered by the Apocalypse.
Mm.
I mean, I haven't played Spire. I hear that's really good, but
It's my favorite system. I love the resistance system so much.
anything else you'd like to bring up about Slayers and Dust and all that fun stuff?
I think that's well. Right now, the Dust Kickstarter is going on, so I guess depending on when you see this, go check out the Dust Kickstarter. It's going on until November 16th. It's for the physical print of the zine, but also you can get a PDF copy as well. And for folks who are learning about this and don't have Slayers or maybe have never heard of Slayers before, with the Dust campaign, there's the ability to add on the Slayers rulebook, either digitally or physically, so that you can kind of jump all in on it in case you don't have the rulebook. Dust is still for you. You can still use it just by grabbing the Slayers book. So that's going on until the 16th. We're super, super close to funding as of this moment. I think we're just like 200 something dollars away. So hopefully we cross that finish line soon. And speaking of newspaper prints, we only have one stretch goal, and it's for we want to print the map, that hex map that we were talking about earlier, on a newspaper, so that people actually have like a physical map that they can kind of hold, which is cool. And then the other side will just be a big picture of this beautiful art spread that Mike has done for the book. So hopefully, hopefully we hit that as well. That would be wonderful. But otherwise, for Slayers, the jam ends on Halloween, so I'm really excited. I'm going to do like a highlight reel just to show off everybody's fantastic work after that's done, and then I'm going to like finally rest for a little bit on Slayer stuff. Doing Dust right away after the other Kickstarter was really fun. I'm glad I rode that momentum and that high, but I'm also ready to like hibernate. So you'll hear more about Slayers in the future, but we're gonna go dormant for a little bit.
Yeah, it'll be like 2 weeks, and then we'll get the Kickstarter for like the Great Swamp or something.
Yeah, exactly. I say I'm gonna rest, and I'm horrible at that. I'm horrible at holding myself to it. So I know I'm gonna break that rule, but I'm putting it into this video now to hopefully keep myself accountable.
Yeah, take a little bit of time at least, before the giant mountain or what
Right,
have you.
exactly.
I'm definitely not just trying to plant ideas in your head.
Right. Well, somebody mentioned this on the Dust Kickstarter that if this is a supplement that's inspired by the Gunslinger class, then there needs to be a supplement for all the other core classes in the book. So something for the Tactician, Arcanist, and Blade, which is a great idea.
Oh man,
we'll see when I get to that.
I would love to see like the feudal Japanese inspired Blade.
Yeah, I don't know what I would do. Especially with like the Tactician. The Tactician is the one that I really don't know what a supplement of the Tactician would look like. Again, I'm sure I'll come up with something way too soon, but we'll see. We'll see.
I'm very much looking forward to it, and I'm very glad to see that there's more stuff for Slayers in the pipeline, because it's really cool. And someday there will actually be an actual play of it on Midgardia, probably.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I can only play 5th edition for so long.
That's part of why I made it. To escape.
Yeah. There's so much good 5th edition stuff, but it's still 5th edition. You need variety.
Exactly. Which is why I made an infinitely expandable game, so that you can always have variety.
And I am very thankful for it. Well,
perfect.
I think, do you have any final words for our lovely audience?
I think just thank you to everybody who has supported Slayers in the past or has continued to support it, but also continuing to slay. I really, really am appreciative of that. You all are wonderful. You fuel me in all of this, so thank you for this, and thank you very much for the opportunity to come on and talk more about Slayers. I always appreciate that. So thank you to you, and thank you to everybody.
Oh, thank you very much, and thank you for coming on. It's always a joy to talk to you.
Absolutely. Well, it was wonderful.
And yeah, there's a link to it right below this. So if you want, slay that funding goal, go down there.
Excellent. Very good.
All right. And for those of you watching at home, have a good night.